story in the Washington Post about how vicious people are being to the Trump. Here it is. It's viciousness in quotes.
I like how they.
Can you put this up on the screen, Matt? Viciousness.
There's never any subtlety in any of these stories.
Well, it's a quote, so it's someone else saying.
No, I understand.
But
it's just funny. These
but
people's
it appears as if they're writing. Trump aides endure public fury towards president's policy. But the first thing you should know about it's viciousness. One of those viciousnessy things that they mention in there. This graph. Most of the interactions that Trump's well-known aides have with strangers amount to nothing more than posing for selfies. So in other words, actually, they get treated like celebrities. But his advisors have also found themselves subjected to a string of embarrassing public spankings. A litany that began even before he took office. Oh my God. What horror. What horror are we going to be talking about? Before Vice President Pence is swearing in. Oh my God. The poor Vice President Pence. Incidentally, he was hated in Indiana. Like his approval rating was actually lower than I think Trump's is now nationally.
Oh, significantly so. Trump's up in the 40s. I think he was like 20.
He may have been like high 30s, but low 40s. But pretty sure it was lower than Trump's. Before Vice President Pence is swearing in, his neighbors in Chevy Chase, where he was renting a house. Oh, God. I almost don't want to even read what happens next. This is so vicious. They hung up rainbow banners.
It's pretty vicious.
To protest his opposition to equal rights for gay men and lesbians. Full-on rainbow banners on their house. Oh, my God.
That's a real, there was a real spanking.
The horror.
More of a figurative spanking.
Right. And then when Pence went to the musical Hamilton, and I'm curious, how did Pence get tickets to that so quickly?
Yeah.
So when he was given tickets, right?
There's a special StubHub if you want to do publicity stunts.
Right. When Pence went to the musical Hamilton, I think we all remember this. This was so horrible, folks. I had to make sure that my kids didn't read the newspapers for days because I didn't want my daughter to think that actors in a play, particularly the actor playing Aaron Burr, concluded the evening by announcing from the stage that he was afraid Trump wouldn't uphold our, our inalienable rights. Oh, the horror, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, well, that's pretty vicious.
I let my kids read about how 100 kids under the age of 5 have been separated from their parents and essentially kidnapped, and we've lost any mechanism in which to identify them, or the other 2,500 or so that have been kidnapped from their parents. I let them read about that because that I know they can handle. But the idea that maybe there would be a rainbow flag up, that is just a bridge too far.
Well, maybe if you're Mike Pence, it is. I do want to say...
Go to hell.
Right. You can go straight to hell. This was a couple of months after I think he'd been on the VP ticket, but as of 2016, and he's still governor of Indiana, his approval rating was at 34%.
Wow.
With a 33 negative. Yes. So as I recall, it was super bad. It was not.
I'm sure no one in Indiana had the absolute viciousness.
Well, you know what?
To hang up a rainbow flag.
Do you remember when Pence, I forget, there was some big homophobic thing in like 2014 or something in Indiana. I don't even remember what it was. And Mike Pence would come out and he'd be like, well, we've got the Hoosier spirit. It's the Hoosier spirit. That was his big, which is basically we're really polite to each other while we discriminate against people.
Here's another anecdote there. And really, all of you should feel horrible about this story. One night, Stephen Miller ordered $80 of takeout sushi from a restaurant near his apartment. And a bartender followed him into the street and shouted, "Stephen." When Miller turned around, the bartender raised both middle fingers and cursed at him.
The viciousness.
This is according to an account Miller has shared with White House colleagues.
It's like growing up in Long Island.
And then Miller was so angry, he threw his sushi away.
Good.
Which
I love it. You know what? If it affects him like that, and it's as simple as just a middle finger, it's
you're going to
terrific.
tell me to F off? Well, then I'm throwing $80 of mine away.
That's great.
Yeah, I would just eat it with
If it's
more
so
relish.
easy to get his feelings, then perfect.
If I was Stephen Miller, I'd be like, you made sushi for a white supremacist, and I'm going to relish it now.
This is,
I don't think
and
he has
then
that
you have
poise,
something like
Matt.
this. This story is just really, really offensive. On Saturday, Stephen K. Bannon, Trump's former strategist, browsed at an antiquarian bookstore in Richmond,
For medals or
Virginia.
something?
What's that?
What was he? What
No,
kind of
he's probably
antiques?
looking for some Nazi
What vintage?
text.
Yeah, exactly.
1930s?
Yeah.
Medals?
Yeah.
Got any new books in for Mussolini's guys? Hey.
Still looking for that second edition, Michael.
There was Robert's one where there was a blogger section
Got to
on
round
World
out
War
the
One.
collection.
I'll tell you what,
So-
Hitler was a good artist.
Apparently, and you know, this resonates with me because today I had to take the kids to the camp, and I was listening to Glenn Beck on the way home, and he's,
gosh.
Glenn Beck, like it seems like every time I listen to Glenn Beck, he's reading the Declaration of Independence again, and slowly, and sort of explaining what each word means, like inalienable. In other words, a right that cannot be alienated from you. But he's talking about how he's conflating the notion of free speech again, where it's like where free speech rises, it becomes a free speech issue if you're criticized for saying something,
Right.
right? Like making no differential between the state infringing upon abortion rights versus people criticizing us for being pro-life. Like there's no distinction. And this is, of course, he's on this is very popular in the conservative circles now, this aggrievement where they try and make it seem like they're being oppressed because they're being criticized, or they're, a bartender told them to F off is the functional equivalent of the state's apparatus infringing upon an individual right. And this distinction is very important. That's why we don't talk about, when we talk about things being a free speech issue, it must involve government intrusion upon this to be a free speech issue, or that speech must be particularly protected. And I don't even know if I have an example of this in private life. I mean, you can be fired for saying stuff on the job, folks. You could make an argument that you shouldn't be because of what you said, but you could be fired. There's no law against it. That's just the way it is. And it is not a First Amendment issue. So anyways, so Bannon is in the bookstore. And
Might not be a First Amendment issue, but it's a Jew issue.
According to the owner of the books, a woman in the shop called Bannon a piece of trash.
That sounds so tame.
You just have to say trash.
What would you
Trash.
say to
You
Steve Bannon
are
if you
a piece of
encountered him
trash.
at a bookstore?
And so the owner threatened to call the police on her. We are a bookshop. Bookshops are all about ideas and tolerating different opinions, and not about verbally assaulting somebody, which was happening.
Womp womp.
And okay, so but honestly, like, okay, you're the bookstore owner, you get to do that. But here's what would happen if you called the cops. The cops would show up and they would go, "Seriously? I'm sorry, did you just call us because someone called somebody else a piece of trash? You told the lady to leave, right? Did she leave? Oh, she did? Oh, okay. Now, here's
Was the
other
woman
question.
black, ma'am?
Here's the other question. How did the Washington Post find out about this story? Right? Like, do you think the owner of this bookstore said, I've got to get to the Post about this? This is like the Pentagon Papers. I've got to let them know that a lady in my store called Steve Bannon a piece of trash.
I got to
Or
coordinate a
do you
meth
think
deal.
Steve Bannon, whined about it to the reporter. Because there's another story about Steve Bannon, and this is really just the idea that there are two of these stories, folks, is just heartbreaking. While he was a part of the president's team, Bannon dealt with enemy life in Washington, a city he freely described as enemy territory. Oh, I see. Okay. So he called it enemy territory and then wondered why people called him a piece of trash. Okay, fair enough. By hiring security and rarely venturing out in public. As if this is any different than Steve Bannon, any report of the way Steve Bannon has acted in his entire existence, right? This is a guy they found his rental apartment in Florida. The bathtub was corroded from acid.
It was taken out of context.
When Bannon traveled, it was usually aboard a private plane. Never does it appear that the Washington Post said, how did you used to travel before? A private plane.
It was because I've been in a lot of every city I've lived in and wanted to conquer because of my rage and narcissistic projection of the world is enemy territory. Because I wanted to be in L.A. and in Washington.
Check the
Are you a Jew? Stop asking me questions.
Here's a story of
What would
Sean
you
Spicer.
say to, real quick, what would you say to Steve Bannon if you saw him at a bookstore?
You're a piece of trash.
Right.
My understanding, sir, is that you're a piece of trash. A White House reporter once on the phone with Sean Spicer while the then press secretary was standing in his yard in Alexandria said he could hear a passing motorist shouting curses at him. Good. Good.
How could you be sure that for you?
I love how that's Spicer too. It's like all the other ones get like these personalized interactions, but Spicer just gets the guy like, "Hey, asshole!
A drive-by.
Hey, you're a loser. You can't even get a TV contract. Hey, the only thing you've ever contributed to society was Melissa McCarthy doing a funny impression of you."
This is unbelievable. You don't even get stories about this for like, I don't know, celebrities who have to deal with the public.
Well,
This
wait,
is
is it true that, and I'm reaching here, you would know this better than me, but was it true that there was some like priest that wouldn't give John Kerry communion when he ran for president because he's pro-choice?
yes. Oh, yes.
Were there
of course.
whining articles about that?
Of course not.
Right.
Of course not.
Right.
I mean, give me a break.
The guy couldn't even find refuge in his own church. I mean, that actually, I'm not, sentimental about those things, but if anything, I mean, that seems to me like a lot more of a real thing than someone says at a bookstore, "Hey, you're a jerk."
I mean, can you imagine if you had to turn on? Well, I mean, I just talk about the abuse that Janine Garofalo got back in the
Right.
day when she was the reluctant face of the anti-war movement. I mean, they were blowing her up in comedy movies. They were, she was being maligned from television programs. People were stopping on the street and threatening her. People didn't read about it because she wasn't whining to the Washington Post about it. Or can you imagine being someone where you would turn on your TV and see entire arenas yelling, "Lock her up," or doing like the
Pocahontas.
Indian tomahawk
Yeah.
chop because or maybe the president of the United States calling you Pocahontas. I mean, this is such garbage. It is indicative of the two-pronged strategy, and we'll talk about the other prong that the Republicans have for the fall that is not going to work. One is that these conservative icons are being maligned. But here's the problem with why that's not going to work to motivate Republican voters is because I don't think the Trump voters are going to vote no matter what. But I don't think, broadly speaking, Republicans who would vote for Trump actually give a crap about Steve Bannon or Steve Miller or Donald Trump for that matter. They just want what they can get out of these guys, which is like, terrorize immigrants, cut my taxes, then also, crap on black guys who are making too much money. That's basically it, right? I mean, that's the Republican agenda, and they're just not moved in any way by the slights on Stephen Miller that he has to throw out his $80 worth of sushi because he's just so disgusted. God, I couldn't even put that piece of tuna in my mouth knowing that bartender said F you to me. I couldn't even do it.
What an unbelievable...
This is the worst story they can come up with. Not like, someone left a dead pig's head like on the back seat of your car. They broke into my car and left a dead pig's head. Like that might be like, that's a little disturbing. But a bartender said F you and you decide to throw out your own sushi, that's going to motivate people to vote. The other one is that the entire Democratic Party has been taken over by this woman who won a primary in New York, as opposed to Bernie Sanders, right? They tried to, they're so muddled in their attempts to motivate Republicans to go out and vote that they can't find anything. And I don't know. It's funny to watch them flail. But we'll talk.
But they're really, what's so funny about
when we
them
go into the fun half, we'll play this
really
stuff with Cornel West.
They're
and Huckabee too.
They are seriously aggrieved. I mean, it's incredible.
always-
You've read the column that come out every couple of months about how hard it is for Trump administration officials, like in their 20s and 30s, to go to date in Washington.
Oh yeah, we talked about that last week.
It's just incredible. It's like
Yes. It's super hard, but no one cares.
And no one
Here's
cares,
the thing:
right,
is
no
that
one cares.
the reason why they don't feel that pent up, and we'll play this clip of another example of a white guy who decides I've deputized myself and I'm going to make sure that this black person actually belongs in this area. I'm now a deputy, a self-identified deputy, but the pent up. The anti-PC that was pent up, right? This notion of I'm aggrieved because I can no longer say hey, what's this black person doing in my neighborhood? That's gone now for them because they all feel like they can. They all
Mitt
feel
Romney.
like it's
Mitt Romney
total,
said it. He said
total. What's that?
Trickle down racism.
Yes.
He was correct.
Yes. They all feel like they now have this sort of license to express it. It's Trump time. And fortunately now I have my free speech back again, where I don't feel guilty about telling the dirty immigrants to get out. I can teach my kid that Mexicans are overpopulating us. That's the era
In
that we're
Montana.
living in Montana, right. We have no room out here. Too many Mexicans.
I did see Norm Macdonald, of all people, who if anything, I thought his politics were a bit to the right. I don't know much about him, but he actually did a riff a while ago, which just registers at least that some of this PC thing is kind of starting to burst in some ways in the culture, because he was doing a routine about Cosby, and he was like, when is a rapist going to come forward and be like, I'm not PC. I like to rape people. Sorry to not be politically correct. And it was like, right, that's exactly where that would fit. That is exactly. I think even the pedophile guy who was running as a libertarian said something like that. I'm not politically correct, which is why you'll find me writing criminal things on internet forums about assaulting children. I'm just not PC.